Okay, so we recently talked about Windrose, the adventure pirate game that's like kind of breaking the standards right now when it comes to AAA titles. But you know what's coming later this year that is so highly anticipated is GTA 6. And if GTA 5 told us anything, and yes, I know there were lots of GTAs even outside of just normal numbering prior to that. Fun fact, I played the original GTA when it was a arcade console with a top-down run around, steal cars, and run away for the cops. You know, when it was actually GTA, not, cartel simulator. Anyway, I digress. GTA 6 is coming out November of this year if it's not delayed again. And with it being an extremely highly anticipated title that will be making its way to PC, we're going to talk today whether or not you need to upgrade, because GTA 5 kind of pushed a lot of people like myself to have to upgrade that were already running slightly aging hardware as it was then. And because Rockstar develops their own engines and they sort of use them to showcase future tech, we're going to talk about whether or not you need to upgrade or just buy a PlayStation 5 Pro? Okay, so GTA 6, obviously one of Rockstar's biggest titles in anticipation. The world is supposed to be like twice as big as what Los Santos was, and we're all kind of really excited to see that. But we're not going to talk about the game today because everything is still sort of theoretical based on leaks, and some confirmed leaks, some non-confirmed leaks. It's really kind of a weird. It's funny how gaming and it kind of reminds me of like when the early iPhones would get leaked and left at a bar and stuff, and it became huge news. Now nobody cares, right? So we're talking about gaming now and these leaks and such. GTA 6 is going to be interesting. If you guys weren't around for the GTA 5 launch, it launches on console first. Rockstar's first obligation is to consoles, not because they're anti-PC, but because they're like, show me the money, and they know where the money is. In fact, talking about money right now. So if you guys aren't aware, Rockstar was actually hit by a hacker group last month where a lot of their earnings was leaked. And little sidebar conversation, it's kind of funny that the hackers didn't do any damage to Rockstar. In fact, their stocks skyrocketed after the hack because earnings, which are often like saved for annual earnings calls and such, leaked at a really random time, can truly affect stock prices. But when investors saw the kind of money they're still making and essentially just printing for something that is more than a decade old now, they're like, we want in on that. So all the hackers did was pump the stock price for Rockstar. Good job, hackers. You thought you did something bad. It turns out you did a service. So it was actually leaked that GTA Online for console is generating 6.3 million from PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X per week. That's 6.3 million a week. You might be asking yourself, but what about PC players? PC players play too. Well, the GTA Online for PC makes about $250,000 a week. So when you got a ridiculous amount of discrepancy between PC and console and online being a recurring cost, that's literally just printing money, you can see why they prioritize console first. So although GTA 6 is coming out in November of 2026, you are not going to see a PC port for like another year after that. And I think that's because they're not putting any real effort into the PC version of it right now. The port process will start after the console version is ironed out. You got some time. If you're thinking you need to upgrade by November, unless that upgrade means going out to Best Buy and buying a PS5 Pro because you don't have one, which would be a lot cheaper than upgrading your PC, you're good for now. So this quote comes from an article from Hot Hardware. We'll put a link down in the description below if you guys want to read the full article. But they interviewed Strauss Zelnick. He missed his calling as, well, I almost said a rock musician, but I guess he's the CEO of Take-Two, which is the parent company that owns Rockstar. So he's like up there. Anyway, he was asked by Hot Hardware why they chose to, delay the PC launch and launch the console first. And really, it's just a repeating story from GTA 5. But he says, when asked why the company was skipping PC at launch given its current strength as a gaming platform. Yeah, PCs are pretty strong as a gaming platform. Anyway, says Zelnick responded by saying that Rockstar always starts on console because I think with regard to a release like that, you're judged by servicing the core. Like, really servicing the core. And if your core customer isn't there, if they're not served first and best, you kind of don't hit your other consumers. So basically what he's saying is you follow the money, right? And I guess that's what CEOs are supposed to do. And they're not servicing PC. To be honest, I'm kind of happy they're not half-assing a PC port at the same time as trying to launch for console. But when you're a console player, you probably are going to have 20 to 25 to 1 console players or more versus PC for GTA 6, you kind of got to start there. So I hope that they really do their diligence though on that porting time, because we've seen as PC gamers what really bad console ports look like. So it's kind of like, make sure you get it right. Now let's talk about the specs and requirements though, because we do have some leaked information here on potential like requirements for the game. Nothing is 100% official yet. I mean, there is, like, this comes from Orange Hardware's, basically talking about system requirements for PC. And it says here what PC hardware you'll need in 2026. No, you're gonna need it in 27. Because remember what we said here, the PC port is coming out later. Anyway, moving on, we have minimum and recommended. Now, minimum specs just means you can turn on the game, you can run it. It's gonna look like a slideshow, but whatever. So for your CPU, you're looking at a Core 9600K or a Ryzen 5 3600. For GPU, you're looking at a 1660 GTX. So funny to not say RTX, but anyway. Or an RX 5600 XT. 16 gigabytes of system RAM, 150 gigabytes of hard drive space. Anyway, and then Windows 10 or newer. Now that's minimum, right? That is not gonna be a fun experience, especially on the whatever the new version of this engine is gonna be called. The recommended requirements though are quite the jump, up to a 12700K for Intel CPU or a 5800X for AMD. A 3070 or a 6700 XT for GPUs, 32 gigabytes of system RAM, and then the same Windows, or the same 150 gigabyte requirement, and Windows 11. It's funny how they have Windows 11 in there versus Windows 10. That could be a scheduler thing though for some of these GPUs and CPUs that they're mentioning, so possible. But anyway, says GTA 6 CPU requirements explained for smooth gameplay. It's actually recommending a 13600KF as well as more like a higher end recommended, but they go on to have additional recommended CPUs specifically in this article talking about, or assuming GPUs, saying 4070 Ti or 4060 Ti. You're gonna want as much VRAM as possible though, honestly. But the reason why this matters is because what Rockstar tends to do is they'll optimize for the current console hardware, but then really try and hit future hardware that hasn't come out yet. So for instance, when GTA 5 first came out, Xbox 360 was still a very dominant console in the wild, and PlayStation 3. But obviously, PlayStation 4 was on the horizon, Xbox One was on the horizon, all that stuff. So they kind of like had to support the older, aging out hardware, but also the future hardware that was coming as well. Now we're in an interesting space right now because we have PS5 and then PS5 Pro, PS5 or PS6 leaks are kind of on the horizon. So I'm sure if there's a PlayStation 6 currently in even a like prototype format, Rockstar's already got a hold of it, and they're probably already working with engineers from Sony trying to make sure, and AMD trying to make sure that everything is optimized for future hardware as well. And that's where you're gonna see the PC side of it maybe kind of leverage some of the more newer technology. Now the thing is, if this holds true, it's not going to be an extremely demanding game to play, but if you're already struggling on anything like GTA 5 or even let's say Red Dead Redemption 2, we'll talk about why I'm mentioning that in a second, you might find yourself needing to upgrade. In fact, the 3060 non-Ti just like recently overthrew the 1060 and 1060 Ti. Was there a 1060 Ti? There was a 1060 Ti, I think. But it overthrew the 10 series finally as the most dominant GPU in the Steam survey. And I've heard people be like, the Steam survey is not accurate. It's like, well, it's literally pulling everyone's hardware that Steam is installed on and updates if you update your hardware. So I think it's a pretty good example of hardware that's out there in the wild right now. But when it comes to CPU, it's kind of interesting too that like 54% of the Steam survey is showing that gamers are still on an Intel CPU. Now that's any generation CPU that could run, I mean, it breaks down by speed, but not by actual model number like GPU. But that's surprising to me. That means AMD's really caught up, which is crazy because I know a few years back, maybe 5 years ago, that would have been up in the 70s or 80% of Intel. Phil is showing me the trend chart, and you can see the red, like, it looks like the red's coming down, but the red is filling in the blue very slightly, but it's happening. Anyway, so to talk about what they might need in the future, because what they tend to do too is like these recommended specs are gonna be enough to run the game at like usually medium to high settings, but then they'll have some tech in there or some fidelity settings or detailed settings that when you put them on like Epic or Ultra or whatever they are, it's like it really chugs the recommended settings. we have to look at like the requirements of GTA 5 and then Red Dead Redemption 2, which was the progression of that engine. And then now GTA 6 is going to be the newest version of that engine, and they're going to take advantage of current hardware. So GTA 5 had a requirement of Windows 10, 64-bit, which is kind of interesting because Windows 10 was like really new then. But Intel Core 2 Quad Q6600. Maybe we should do a video about the Q6600 or the extreme build that I did to see how could it run GTA 5. Because these are meeting the requirements, sort of. 2.4 gigahertz, 4-core CPU or better, or an Intel Phenom 9850, wow. 4 gigabytes of system memory, a 9800 GT with 1 gigabyte of VRAM, or an AMD HD 4870 with 1 gigabyte of VRAM running DX10, 10.1, or DX11, 125 gigabytes of storage. It's funny how we still talk about 150 feeling big, but nothing, I mean, 125 gigs back in the early 2010s on what were not usually SSDs at the time, that was absolutely ridiculous spec or requirement for space. And then a sound card. I love it. But that was the minimum. Recommended was an Intel Core i5 3470, which is an Ivy Bridge CPU, or an FX 8350, which I'm gonna be honest, I had an 8320 when it launched, and I had to upgrade. In my opinion, it wasn't playing well, but FX was kind of dog crap anyway back then. 8 gigabytes of system RAM, and then 2 gigabytes of VRAM is what it's saying here. And then the same 125 gigabytes worth of storage and DirectX 10 and a sound card. Now, I'm only telling you that because if we look at the jump now for Red Dead Redemption 2, that jumps up to the minimum requirements being an Intel Core i5 2500K, which is Sandy Bridge. That's so funny. Remember, we went from Q6600 to a 2500K. That's a pretty big jump. 8 gigabytes of system memory, GTX 772 gig, or an R9 280 3 gig. And then you need a network connection because it was requiring DRM and validation and such. 150 gigabytes of available space. So Red Dead Redemption 2 is the same file size as GTA 6. And then obviously a DirectX compatible sound card. Recommended though was a 4770K or a Ryzen 5 1500X, 12 gigabytes of system memory, which is a weird number for dual channel. Most people weren't running 6 gigabyte sticks, but anyway, I digress. Many of you did. 1066 gig. Remember, there was a 1063 gig, so it's important to put the 6 gig on there. And then that was like the original, like how everyone kind of pushes back against 8 gig cards today. That's what the 3 gig or the 3070 3.5 gig cards were like. Anyway, I digress. A Radeon 480 4 gigabyte card and the same 150 storage. So you can see that's a pretty big jump to go from those specs in Red Dead Redemption 2, which in my opinion still looks great, to the leaked specs for minimum requirements and recommended requirements for GTA 6. And just to put them back on screen, mention them again here real quick. It jumps up to a 9600K, or this is a minimum, by the way, 9600K or a Ryzen 5 3600. Recommended though 12700K and a 5800X. Recommended GPU of a 3070 or a 6070 XT and 32 gigs of system RAM. So that's why I'm saying, like, and this recommended is not for the maxed out settings, right? Maxed out settings are a whole different tier. You're gonna have to have top tier hardware to run GTA 6 at max settings. Anyway, that was a really long video to say it's gonna take another year once it launches in November. You've got time. If you wanna build a rig, right now is really kind of a terrible time, but prices are starting to trend downward. So maybe by the time November rolls around, or even early 2027, before the game makes its way over to PC, pricing will come down, which would mean you can afford more for the same money, which means higher tier product, hopefully. And we'll be keeping an eye, obviously, on pricing and such. So I'm curious though, and I'm gonna put this helmet on right now because I do honestly feel like I might be setting myself up here for some punishment. How many of you are going to upgrade your PC to play GTA 6? Or how many of you are going to, I've already said, fuck PC, I'm just getting a PlayStation Pro?